Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Today is Tuesday, May 6th. Just touched on Brett Yormark's extension as the Big 12 Commissioner. Going to talk a little bit now about Jared Curtis and his commitment to the Georgia Bulldogs. But before we discuss and dive into that, I just want to remind everyone this show is all about you. We love hearing from you, your comments, questions, insights, whatever you got, we want to hear it. We want to make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. One easy way to ensure that your comment, question gets on the air, gets read, is to use the Super Chat feature. To do that, you can click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your message or question there. This ensures that your message gets on the air and gets read live, and it's also just a great way to support our channel and support what we're doing here at GSMC. We couldn't do what we do without your ongoing support, and we're so grateful to have y'all as a part of our community here at the GSMC network. So, quarterback Jared Curtis, 5-star, has officially recommitted to the Georgia Bulldogs. So Curtis had committed to Georgia in March of 2024, spent nearly 7 months pledged to the Bulldogs, and then pulled his commitment in the fall, kind of said, I want to look at different schools, explore different options, go take visits elsewhere. But all along, he had said May 5th would be his decision. We've known this for weeks, that this was going to come out yesterday, of where he's going to go to school. Really came down to Georgia, or Oregon, it sounds like. And mind you, Jared Curtis, this is a kid that's number 1 overall quarterback prospect in the 2026 class, according to ESPN. ESPN has him as the number 5 overall recruit in that class. Kid that's 6'4", 225, quarterback out of Nashville, plays for Nashville Christian. A guy that's a really solid prospect. But so he was between Georgia and Oregon, spent time on the phone with both coaching staffs, allegedly on Sunday afternoon on the 4th. And then yesterday, sources said that people in both programs, they had no idea where he was going to go. Even people in Jared Curtis's camp allegedly told ESPN reps that they had prepared 2 commitment videos. They had one for Georgia, they had one for Oregon, before he actually made his public announcement on social media. So even they really did not know where Jared Curtis was going to do, how this was going to kind of all shake out. And this is a big deal for Georgia. So this is a guy that they've really wanted, a guy that has had 7,600 passing yards in his career, over 130 total touchdowns in 3 varsity seasons. 4th ESPN 300 recruit in this class for Georgia. This is a guy that's big framed, 6'4", got a really strong arm. Also, just an accurate passer, has pretty impressive mobility too for his size. A guy that over his first 2 years had 5,100 passing yards, 52 touchdowns, only 17 interceptions. Last fall, he was a junior, had another 2,800 yards, threw for 40 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. So improving that accuracy, improving that decision making as he becomes a varsity starter again. This is a kid that's an impressive quarterback. Also led Nashville Christian to the Tennessee Division IIA state title. And then he's also pretty solid on the ground. 1,600 rushing yards in his career, 38 rushing touchdowns, which I think is really impressive, especially when you consider his frame. Oregon now, it seems like they're probably going to have to pivot. I would think they probably are going to turn their attention to 4-star quarterback Ryder Lyons. He's the number 50 guy in the ESPN 300, but a guy that they really like, seems to be really high on pretty much everybody's board across the country. I think he's kind of ranked a little low, just considering the hype I've heard around him. But he's also a guy that's going to be a 2027 quarterback pretty much because he's going on an LDS mission trip after he graduates. So essentially a 27 quarterback. But Oregon, BYU, Michigan, they're all kind of front runners for Rider Lions right now. Ole Miss is still in the mix there too. But if you look at those schools, USC, they picked 4-star Jonas Williams over Rider Lions first. Michigan just picked up Brady Smigel. BYU, they are under serious consideration. Still kind of feels a little bit like a long shot. And then reportedly, Rider Lions loves the Ole Miss offense, but there are still some hurdles there, which makes sense, especially when you consider Ole Miss is really targeting 4-star Landon Duckworth right now, it sounds like, who had his eye on Georgia, but Jared Curtis is obviously going there, so not going to go to Georgia anymore. Probably the guy that's going to end up at Oxford and Ole Miss. My question here, if you're an elite quarterback prospect, why are you going to Georgia? It doesn't make sense. Let me go down the list. So yes, obviously Georgia is a very successful program, probably the most successful in the past 5 years. But let's go down the list of, first, we'll do top ranked quarterback recruits from Georgia. So Justin Fields in 2018 was number 2 nationally. He transferred after a year, went to Ohio State. Was obviously a first-round pick, but all of his success was from Ohio State. Jacob Eason, 2016, a guy that was number 4 nationally, but a guy that bounced around, transferred multiple times, never really found his footing anywhere. Brock Vandegrift, 2021, number 34 nationally. Never played at Georgia, got beaten out, started for Kentucky this year, didn't play great. Jake Fromm, 2017, was number 51 nationally. Right now, this is the most successful guy in terms of running the Georgia offense, team success, but still, as an individual, not super successful. And then you have, once you go back to Matthew Stafford, who obviously was pretty much a 5-star quarterback, that's kind of the outlier, though, is Stafford, and then that's about it. Look at their draft history from Georgia quarterbacks. Stetson Bennett in 2023 was a 4th rounder. Jake Fromm, 2020, 5th rounder. Aaron Murray was the next quarterback that was drafted in 2014, 5th rounder. And then you have to go back to Matthew Stafford before Aaron Murray in 2009. It was the first overall pick. But so basically, since Matthew Stafford, there have not been any successful quarterbacks in the NFL to come from Georgia, right? Yes. So I guess if your goal is to win a championship in college, sure, right? Obviously, Georgia's a great place to do that. National contenders, stacked roster across the board pretty much every season. But if you're an elite quarterback and your goal is to eventually go to the NFL, get the best training, experience, just building up process as a quarterback to try to become an elite quarterback prospect to make that jump to the NFL to the next level, why would you go to Georgia? It doesn't make sense. Look at the history of it. And then look at what's happened under Kirby Smart, too, right? Yeah, he had Fromm, but he still played Fromm, still chose his experience over a much more dynamic Justin Fields. Justin Fields obviously played a little bit freshman year, but then transferred. Then you have Fromm. Then you have Stetson Bennett, who was a former walk-on, who, yes, he won games there, but it's a guy that's not going to be an NFL starter. Carson Beck could eventually be he's going to be drafted next year, most likely, but now he's at Miami, and if he does really well this year, it's kind of going to be like Cam Ward, where people are going to remember him for what he does at Miami. They're not going to remember him as a Georgia quarterback. And if he flames out, then he'll probably be remembered as a Georgia quarterback. But if you look at just that success under Kirby Smart, why would you go to Georgia as an elite quarterback prospect? It doesn't make sense. You're pedigree-wise, it doesn't look likely that you're going to be able to get to the NFL, or at least get to the NFL in that aspect capacity that you want. So why do it? Why risk it? Especially if you're Jared Curtis and the other school you're looking at is Oregon. Look at what's happened with Oregon under Dan Lanning. You had Bo Nix come in. Bo Nix, who, after his Auburn career, I would have been surprised if he got drafted. Bo Nix comes into Oregon and is a first-round pick and now had a really successful rookie season. Dylan Gabriel comes in, gets drafted in the 3rd round as a 24, 25-year-old. So if you're Jared Curtis, you have Georgia, who hasn't produced an elite quarterback in 15 years, essentially, since Matthew Stafford, at least in terms of getting to the next level. And then you have Oregon, who has had Bo Nix, who has another guy, their last starter got drafted. It's an exciting offense, and it's an attractive offense. Why would you go to Georgia over Oregon or over another school where they prioritize quarterback development a little bit more? I don't really think it makes a lot of sense if that's your ultimate goal, right? If your goal is to go win a national championship, have a really successful academic career, like team success, if that's what your goal is, sure, Georgia's a great place to do that, right? Georgia, they're not going to drop out of the national conversation anytime in terms of winning a national title, winning the SEC championship. That's always going to be up on the board in the conversation for the Georgia Bulldogs. But if you're an elite quarterback, why do it? It doesn't really make sense. It's not going to help your career. And maybe Jared Curtis is one of those outliers. It's very possible. He could be similar to Stafford, where this is kind of the outlier. It's an elite quarterback for Georgia. But looking at that history, it's more likely than not that that's not going to be the case. Or he might have to transfer elsewhere in order to really reach that full potential. Those are just some of my kind of questions about that decision. But from an on-field perspective, at the minimum, this gives Georgia a really great depth piece, a long-term quarterback solution, and a guy that could step in and eventually raise the ceiling of that Georgia offense. But will it help his career in the long term? I guess we're going to find out, though, and we're going to see what Jared Curtis can eventually do as a Georgia Bulldog. So we're going to take our second break of the show right now. When we come back, going to talk a little bit about Clemson, about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and their new deal securing that matchup for quite a while. So stick with us. We'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.